Hello, everybody. This is Fernando for the latest Ghosts and Spirits podcast. All right, let's go ahead and we'll do another Ghost of the Week. This time, this one from the webpage theghost.wiki.com, just a random page that randomly brought up a listed item, told me of a location. So rather than actually talking about a specific ghost in general, it's about a location to cover for this particular video. Quite fascinating. I didn't realize that this particular location there in Washington, D.C., I was so close to it a couple of years back, and had I known about this location beforehand, I would have definitely made a trek over to it. It's called the Octagon House. That's what this video is going to be about. And it's located there in Washington, D.C., which you'll see a picture of here. Interestingly enough, it's called the Octagon House, but it's actually in the shape of a hexagon. But for whatever reason, it goes by the Octagon House. And if you're looking on anywhere in maps, it's very close by to the White House. So if you're ever in Washington, D.C., and you're visiting the White House, as most everyone does when they go there, go a little bit towards east, and about 2 blocks away, you'll be seeing the Octagon House. And so I might go again to Washington, D.C. sometime soon. There's just so much to see that I didn't get a chance to finish last time, that I'll be able to this time, and I will include this Octagon House. Lots of rich history to talk about here. I'll try to cover as much as I can without giving away too much information, without overloading on it. But basically it's like this. This house was built a while back. We're talking like 1801. And a very interesting fact about this house was, shortly after it was built, it became like an interim White House of its own. Because at that time, President James Madison and his family lived in this Octagon House when the White House itself was burned down back in 1814. If you didn't know that, yeah, that's right. The White House at one point early in its in the U.S.'s history was basically burned down by the British. And so when that happened, while the White House was being reconstructed, this was the house that served as the interim White House. And what's very fascinating about this is that during this time, President Madison and his family all lived there, and they all seem to report basically that this house was already haunted, that there was something going on within this house that definitely stood out in the normal. And this is interesting to note, because normally haunted houses, one seems to think that they're usually haunted after having decades or even centuries of existence. Here, this is a house that was barely built. It was barely like 1 decade old, and already it was having haunted experiences. Let's talk about some of those, in fact, right here. The most famous ghost that's in there is actually the wife of James Madison, and that her name is Dolly Madison. Her full name is Dolly Payne Todd Madison, and she was the wife of President James Madison. And when they lived there, she basically used it again as the interim White House, and she definitely took advantage of it being like a substitute White House by hosting parties, by having social get-togethers, by meeting dignitaries there. And so during that brief time that they were there, she was essentially ensured that this place basically ran as the White House would. And the legend goes that she was so fond of this place and about its location and what it was doing and so forth, that when she died, her spirit is still seen to this day reliving essentially what they were doing in that house. For example, people have reported that any time between midnight and dawn in this house, there is a, quote, low hum of pleasant conversation, the sound of silver, and the clink of glasses, as if there's some kind of company being done in the house, like, let's say, a party that's still going on, one of Dolly's famous parties. Another quote is saying that at midnight, Miss Madison is always believed to hold court again amongst the people that used to visit at that place, still unaware, of course, that she is now dead, but she still seems to relive these parties there. People can hear it. People can hear that conversation. People can hear the usual sounds associated with anything involving parties. And so much so that it's something that the tours that people can take there in the Octagon House, which still to this day provides basic tours, they are reported and told about these incidences. Even herself, again, I was mentioning earlier that when her and her husband were living there and they were experiencing some kind of haunting experiences, she reportedly told her husband, President Madison, James, sir, we're going to have to move. But they eventually did, of course, whenever the White House was rebuilt. But to this day, her presence is still there. People can note her presence, by the way, because there's a strong lilac like smell, like a pleasant smell of some sort. And when that happens, people always say, "Oh, it must be her nearby. It's her coming in to visit and see what's going on." And the strongest smell is reported in the drawing room of the house. Now, another area of the house is what that is famous for is its two staircases. These staircases spiral up a total of 3 floors. Now, these incidences that I'm about to mention, these are more of like urban legends of sorts, because there's no apparent true documentation that these 100% occurred, but these are the stories behind them. And the reason why they're stories is because to this day, people can still see the ghosts and apparitions tied to these stories. Apparently, there was a colonel of some sort, a guy by the name of Colonel Taylor, who had 2 daughters that were there in the Octagon. I believe that they lived there in that Octagon during some period in the 1800s. And with one daughter, he was apparently very angry about, I guess, the fellow that she was seeing. He was some military man of some sort, but he was not approving of this. And so they had an argument, and the argument got so heated that when she was near the stairs, she was in the passion of things. She didn't realize how close she was, and then she actually fell right over the stairs. She either fell over the railing or over the stairs themselves. The stories apparently differentiate between one another, but the impact was so severe that she died. And so the ghost that people see to this day is apparently her specter, her ghost apparition is there crumpled right at the bottom of the steps, which is quite a horrid sight. I mean, imagine if you're there as a tour, or if you're there just as one of the workers, and then you see the body of this young girl right there on the landing, obviously, crumpled in wrong areas, body bent and so forth, that shouldn't be in certain ways, then that would be quite a horrid sight. But yeah, people see that to this day. The other of his daughters, of Colonel Taylor's daughters, apparently the same thing happened to her as well. She fell in love with another young man. He was again not approving of this, and so they had a big fight. The twist, though, this time was the daughter left, but then she came back, and because she wanted to apologize and reconcile with with the father. And so when they did this, they were on the 3rd floor. She was accepting his she was saying her apology, he was accepting it seems. But in this moment of passion as well, the daughter was not aware of, once again, the staircase being so close by. She too fell over, and she landed in the same spot as the other daughter, somewhere this time between the 2nd and 3rd floors. And so when this happened, then her body is also seen with regards to its landing place too. So if this is to be believed, then this has happened twice to the same man, both daughters, similar circumstances, same location. But again, there's really no documentation, but those are the urban legends that are tied to at least the real apparitions, the stuff that people do see there, and that's the stories behind them. There's another ghost of some sort that haunts that area there. He's called the Man in Black. People have stated that what they see is they see a man dressed in all black, wearing like what looks to be military uniform of some sort from the 1800s. He'll just casually walk around, even if workers are there, contractors, the people that work there in the Octagon. He'll just basically walk around, and if he notices them looking at him, he'll tip their hat to them, almost as if acknowledging, saying hello, and then he'll just continue past them. There are reports, for example, of a maintenance man stating that he was working there late one night vacuuming the stairs, and he saw this man, again wearing just complete dark black clothing, and he also had a tall hat, and he just saw him walk up the stairs. And when he did so, this man in black turned to look at him, tipped his hat, and then continued right past the maintenance man. Of course, this guy was almost freaked out because he was supposed to be by himself within that building, and yet here all of a sudden there was this guy right there. Another instance had to do with another worker of some sort. There was another maintenance man who overheard like a noise on the 1st floor while he was on the 2nd floor, and thinking again that he's supposed to be the only one there, he looked over the railing of the location by the stair hall, and then that's when he saw this man in black, like everyone else had seen before, walking somewhere downstairs, and then he walked straight through like a wall of some sort. And so when that happened, obviously that unsettled that man. As far as the identity of who this particular person is, it doesn't seem to be known. It's just a standard ghost of some sort that to this day haunts that location. Let's put on another one too. It has to do more of actually with sounds. And what I'm referring to is the sound of bells. Apparently, in the Octagon House, if you're there at the right time, at the right place, you can hear the ghostly sounds of what seem like to be call bells ringing throughout the house when there's supposed to be none there. And the legend goes as this. Apparently, even as early as, again, the early 1800s, people have reported hearing these bells going off. And what had happened was, during that time, there were actually bells in the house. They were used as a way to ring service from their servants. The way I read it, that these bells were the ones that they would hang somewhere, but they would have ropes tied to them and then tied to the walls over specific areas. So that way, you didn't necessarily have to go straight to the bell to ring it. You would in turn have to just go to a certain place in the house and ring it, and then the bell would chime in another part of the house. If you can visualize that, where it's a bell again with a rope tied to it, stretching over several walls, and then you would just go to one place and ring it, then it would catch the attention of the servants throughout various places in the house, and that was the concept of the bell. Now, while those bells were still there in the house, what would happen was these bells would go off on their own, and people would be perplexed. They would realize that something else was going on. Something else was actually ringing these particular bells. So much so that it apparently caught on as a mini form of like a legend of sorts, and people would come over to try to catch these bells ringing on their own. And one guy apparently, who died with that same colonel, the one I just talked about earlier, who had those two daughters die, he was an unbeliever in all these ghosts and apparitions, and he wanted to essentially catch that this was a trick, that what was happening was essentially hysteria, made up stuff. People were truly believing in something that they shouldn't. And so when he was there, he was described as being someone like a very powerful, like a built man, a big man in other words. And he was there to try to catch this and catch the joke on everybody. Sure enough, the bells started ringing on their own. And so he went up and he caught a hold of one of the wires, because he wanted it to stop. I guess he wanted to see where the direction of the ringing was truly coming from. But to his surprise, this wire all of a sudden became so taut, it became so like some unseen force pulled it upward. To his surprise, it actually pushed him up along with the wire. So in other words, he was holding on to it, and then the wire was pulled up by some strong unseen force, and when this happened, it lifted him straight off of the floor itself. And that's when, of course, he realized, yep, that something else was really truly going on. People to this day sometimes think, though, that there could have been rats within the house, that maybe they were walking amongst the wires hidden around the house and causing it to ring. But if so, then how could this incident with this guy truly have occurred? But yeah, if you're there in the Octagon House, and again, if you're at the right place at the right time, apparently you will hear these bells ringing there as well. But yeah, those are just some of the occurrences. I haven't even touched some of the other stuff, like the strange sounds that people hear, the sound of footsteps, the sound of rustling. People describe like this strange sound as if there's a bunch of people in silk clothing moving about, like let's imagine like there's a party of some sort and their dresses are whooshing left and right. People have caught that. People have apparently also caught odors of food being cooked in the kitchen when at that time there's nobody there, there's nobody involved. People have reported seeing lights within the house. Employees have come home to the Octagon House, and they reported having let's say windows closed, lights out, but still stuff being moved. They find footprints in areas that should never have had footprints, especially after these areas have been, quote, undisturbed for a long, long time, and yet lo and behold, there's footprints there too. So lots and lots of strange stuff. I'll leave on one note too. There was an intern working recently there in the Octagon House, and he happened to bring his black Labrador retriever with him. And when he did so, part of his work involved him going down under the basement of the Octagon House, and he brought his dog with him, not really thinking much about it. And when he got to the bottom of the stairs, all of a sudden, this Labrador just started to growl. It growled at something. It got really, really scared. And so it went and it apparently jumped to the nearest source of light, wherever it was in the basement, and stayed there, just basically cowering the whole time, while the intern, not knowing essentially what was going on and not seeing what was causing this, went about his work. But there was a dog, scared for his life, just cowering underneath that light, seeing something that the intern wasn't seeing. But what was that was causing it? Who knows? But that's yet another strange tale involving this house. But yeah, the Octagon House, good suggestion when it comes to this random page on the ghost.wikia.com webpage. And again, next time I'm there in Washington, D.C., which will probably be a couple of years from now that I know this information, and being so close to the White House, I'll definitely take a look later on. If anyone has gone there before, or if anyone knows anybody that has gone there, I'll be quite fascinated to hear any of the information that people have on this too. So, alright everybody, thanks again as always, take care.